Hello, I'm author Bob Pierce, and welcome back to the studio. This is the first of two parts we're just calling Faces, for lack of a better title. In a previous video, we talked about the philosophy of doing a cover design, the psychology of using human faces to attract attention to your book cover. Eye contact being the most compelling thing that you can possibly do to get people to pay attention to your book, especially if they're browsing in some place where you've got a lot of competition, like online, as people scroll along through all the different thumbnail pictures of covers on places like Amazon and other book sites. So getting a face for your cover, well, some people might think it's easier said than done. And, well, it doesn't sound as difficult until you go to try and do it. So we're going to talk about different ways to go about doing it, particularly legal ways to do it. Again, you don't want to infringe on people's copyrights in doing this. You want to make sure that, well, you don't want people to step on your copyright, so you don't want to step on other people either. So we're going to take a look at a few different ways that you can get images online legally and include that in part of your copyright of your own book. So there's a couple of different ways to get an image online from various services legally without stepping on anyone's copyright and getting in trouble for it. One is the idea of public domain photography and art too. The idea being that the photographer has been gone for, not to be indelicate, for 100 years or more, and no longer has claim to the copyrights, nor his estate or anybody else that might be involved. Matthew Brady's photos from the Civil War and from that era are on the National Archives site, the U.S. National Archives, and you can go there and peruse through the various catalogs and download high-resolution images for free. You'll find various other things on there as well. Some of them are copyrighted, so you have to keep an eye peeled on that, especially if you're looking at newer stuff. And also, too, you need to bear in mind that some of them may ask for a small donation. If you're going to use the photograph, they'd like a little bit of compensation coming their way to the photographer, not to the archives. And so you can do that with a credit card, and being the National Archives, you can be pretty safe and comfortable that it's secure. So that's one route to go. There are other places where you can find public domain images. One place you can't go to get them is to a book or a website or someplace that is copyrighted. Even though the image in the book may be public domain, the book is not. So if you scan the image out of the book, you're infringing on the copyright. And a lot of times, just to forewarn you, if you're thinking, well, who's going to know? The people who put these books together to track that kind of thing will do something very subtle to the image in Photoshop. And when you use it, if they should happen to spot it or come across it, they'll be able to identify it. So you may not be able to tell what they did to it, but they would have a record of it, and you don't want to get busted for that. So do it right. Go to the archives, look around, find what you need, and download it legally. The other option is using a stock photography site. And there are several of them out there, Getty and Shutterstock being two of the biggest. And you can peruse through all of their catalogs of various images. They're not just portrait images of people, but all kinds of images, scenics and still lifes and all kinds of other things. Various photographers contribute to this catalog, and you can download them for a fee. Usually it's a pretty hefty fee. They assume that the people who are going to use these are going to use them for some sort of commercial purpose where they're going to be making money, some sort of a profit on a product or something. And theoretically, that's what you're doing too. You do hope to sell some of these books, right? So they're going to ask for $200 or $300 or so for the download and use of that photo. Now, on the surface, it's a one-time use agreement that you're paying for, and it's not exclusive. So somebody else may come along, look at that same image and think, that would look good on my book cover, and download it, pay the fee, and the service makes more money on the same image, and you end up with multiple books out there with the same image on them on the front cover. Now, I'm not really too concerned about that faction because I usually go in with Photoshop and do a whole bunch of things to various photos, and they end up looking similar but not quite the same as they did when I first downloaded them. So there is a factor of being unique when they end up on my book covers, depending on how involved you want to get with that sort of thing. A lot of these sites will take an extra fee to give you that exclusivity though, and when you pay the fee, they'll take it out of the catalog. It'll disappear off the website. Nobody else can buy it if they haven't already. And also too, if you pay an extra fee, you can get unlimited use of it. That way you can use it for all your promotional materials, all your collateral materials, your banner for Facebook, your postcards and announcements for book signing events, and any of that sort of thing. Anything that you might want to use these images for. If you don't have an unlimited agreement, then you cannot use it for anything other than the book cover that you're paying for it for. Now, it can be expensive, and the big thing about anything you find online, which is always the big caveat, when you go into this, you have an idea in your mind of what you want your cover to look like. And when you go into these sites, what's available is what's available. You may, actually I should probably say, you probably won't find precisely what you're looking for. So you need to be flexible, and you need to have an open mind as far as design is concerned, and just be willing to adjust your thinking and so forth as you go along. And maybe you'll end up with something even better than you had originally hoped for. One of the routes you can go to get good pictures for, well, for free, really, and without any kind of copyright encumbrance, is looking for public domain images. Those are images that have no copyright claim on them or don't anymore. The rule of thumb is that the photographer or the artist has been dead for over 100 years, and therefore the copyrights have run out and cannot be renewed. One of the good sources that I have found is the National Archives. They have a site that you can go on to. This is the Washington National Archives, and they have a lot of images, historical images, military, science, and all the NASA images are on there as well. There are a few pictures on there, just to give you a fair warning, that are copyrighted. A lot of the more modern images, particularly those that are owned by news agencies like AP and others. So do keep an eye out for that while you're perusing around. And most of them do ask you to include some sort of a photographer's credit, and you'll find that somewhere on the page. Copy it, paste it onto a note file, so that you can just put it into your copyright page without getting the spelling incorrect. Another great option, in addition to public domain imagery, is royalty-free. There's a lot of sites out there that feature the photos of a number of photographers who put their stuff up without copyright, but do ask for maybe a small donation and definitely a photo credit in whatever you're going to use them for. In this case, you'll put it on your copyright page in your book. My go-to site is Pexels. These images, however, were found on a Vietnamese site. Kind of stumbled on it looking for images of an Asian woman in an ao dai. The ao dai is the traditional outfit in Vietnam that women wear. If you've ever seen pictures of Vietnam from the war years, even to today, these are contemporary pictures, it's still the traditional dress. And this particular site, of course, it had these images, but it has all kinds of other images as well. Nothing from the war. It's all very positive stuff, scenery, day-to-day life things, marketplaces, all of that sort of thing. And it's really a good treasure trove for this kind of thing. And it works just like all of the other royalty-free sites. For the new murder mystery book, I went to the Pexels download site, looked through their catalog of about 100 or more images, and downloaded maybe about a dozen of them, which they do allow you to do for free. In the process, though, as I selected each one, I copied and pasted the photographer's credit line so that I could go back later on and be sure and include them on my own copyright page with the photo credits. It's great for decision making. I can have all these prints that I can kind of spread out on a table and look through them and decide and try to imagine each one of them as the image, the main image for the front cover. And they do ask that you give a small donation for the photographer. So whichever ones that you end up ultimately using, having that list all copied and pasted onto a note card or pad or whatever it is you've got on a PC there, you can go back and find the photographer and send them a small donation and maybe a word of thanks. Now what I did was I downloaded all the images that I thought might work as a good cover. I tried to reimagine each and every one of them and be as flexible as possible. The caveat in doing this is that whatever you have in mind to begin with, you're probably not going to find quite what you're looking for as a stock photo, either on a stock photography site like Getty or somebody like that, or on one of these download sites. So I went through a whole bunch of them and pared it down to these 8, and ultimately chose 3 of them, the 3 on the left here, to mock up as tests for what could become the ultimate cover for the book Stenja. So this is one of the 3 images that I selected of the dozen or more that I downloaded to mock up and do a test cover of. And it takes some experimentation, but you can see the original photograph, what I downloaded on the left. I silhouetted it out from the background and then laid it on a new background and then did a little bit of airbrushing. It's still kind of rough, but it kind of gives a pretty good idea of how it would come across. Now, I also found on the same site the domes of the Kremlin's St. Basil's Cathedral, which you see in the background of this mock-up. I also used it to make a dark duotone to put in the background of a couple of the other tests. This particular image needed some work, and I probably wouldn't have bothered, except that I'm going to show it to you right now. The tattoo on her chest had to go. The earrings, the one on what is on the right-hand side of this image, her left, is turned. So I made a duplicate of the one on the other side and put it on the right-hand side. She also had what appeared to be stubble on her face, which had to be airbrushed out. But all in all, it didn't take too much time, and it made for a good test anyway. And finally, we settled on this one. I showed all three of these mock-ups to my wife, and she liked this one best as well. You can see the dark duotone of the domes behind the woman's face there. It's rough. It's just a mock-up. I have a lot of Photoshop work to do, and the lettering and so forth needs to be somewhat messed around with. I don't usually do this particular part of the process until the walkabout break, which usually happens between the third, fourth, fifth drafts. But I wanted to do this in advance so that I could show it in these videos. This will ultimately become the cover, the front, back, and the spine. I'm going to create a background that will be extended out to wrap all the way around. So they got a lot of work yet to do with this, and not entirely in love with the type styles that I chose for it, but it's a beginning, and that's where we're going to start when it comes time to actually put this together. So there are a couple of ways that you can get images off of the internet from various services. Very little bother and very little expense, and they can work really well for you. Now in the next video we're going to talk about another option, working with live models, shooting your own photos. There are a lot of things to be aware of. It can be a complicated process, but it can be a lot of fun and definitely be quite rewarding in the end. So check that out in the next video. In the meantime, I'm author Bob Pierce from the studio.